Namaste, everyone. I'm so excited to welcome all of you today. Before we dive into this conversation, let me quickly introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Krupa Nishar, a forensic psychologist and researcher working in the field of prison, crime, and justice system studies. And I'm thrilled to share that this interview marks the launch of my YouTube channel dedicated to forensic and legal psychology. This is our third video, and it's part of a special World Mental Health Month series titled A Day in the Life of Justice. In this series, we'll be talking to the often unseen people who work behind the scenes of the criminal justice system, from filmmakers and crime journalists to law students and digital storytellers, exploring their journeys and challenges and the mental health realities they face every day. And today, I have the privilege of interviewing someone who is the mind behind a good number of crime documentaries we often see, Mr. Patrick Graham. Hiral, I hand over to you for introducing him.
Yeah, so thank you, ma'am. So hello, everyone. I'm Hiral Jogadia, and before we get started, I want to take a moment to briefly explain this project, this initiative. So, World Mental Health Day is celebrated on 10th of October, and this year we wanted to take a different, more fresh approach. So, as we know that discussions on mental health are often limited to therapy, wellness, treatment, etc. But there's so much more to it, yes? Especially when it comes to fields like forensics or criminology, where people are dealing with topics of trauma, injustice on a daily basis. So, therefore, we made this decision to establish a space, a platform for discussing mental health in these extremely demanding professions, which includes right from someone who manages, crime media pages on Instagram to someone behind the camera of crime documentaries, and even those who are working on real life cases, as well as law students. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, I think exactly, Hiral. And today's guest truly represents that world. Patrick, sir, who is a distinguished genre filmmaker known for his gripping work across horror, thriller, and drama series. A London Film School alumnus who moved from the UK to India 2010 and served as showrunner, head writer, and lead director of Betal, Netflix, India's first original zombie horror show, and co-produced by Ivanhoe Pictures, SK Global, Plumhouse, and Red Chillies Entertainment. And Betal and Leila have been one of my favorites. So yes, Hiral,
Okay.
have you seen any?
I've seen his Ghoul. I didn't even know at that time that, I'd get to sit in an interview with the Netflix's Ghoul's writer and director. But yeah, so including Ghoul, his other notable credits also are, Leila, as you mentioned, and Amazon Prime's Dancing on the Grave, and well, of course, the Dupatta Killer. And earlier in his career as well, Phantom Films commissioned two of his original feature films, and he developed Ladies' Room for YRF's Wife Films, one of the first Indian web series to debut on YouTube. And he also has another documentary film which is releasing late in 2025. So yeah, it's really a pleasure to have you here with us today, sir.
Yes,
Well, thank you
thank
very
you,
much.
sir.
No, I mean, oh no, don't be silly. It's a pleasure to be talking to you guys, of course. Very important subject. So yes, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to the show, sir. Shall we start?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So let's begin from the beginning. I would say, what first drew you to the true crime genre, and was there any specific case or any documentary or any book that sparked your interest?
Okay, so the answer to this question is kind of like maybe a bit boring, which is basically during 2020 when COVID was happening, the industry was in quite an uncertain time. And Amazon Prime were just starting with their new unscripted slate, right? And India Today reached out to me with the story that they had, asking me to kind of deliver a kind of cinematic treatment on the story that had been essentially picked up by Amazon. I've always been a documentary fan. I studied documentary at university. I studied documentary at film school, so it's always been something that I've been passionate about, but not necessarily ever thinking that I might ever make one. Right? I love watching documentaries. Like some of the most satisfying viewing experiences I've had have been in the documentary space, right? When you talk about classics like, for example, Making of a Murderer, which kind of kicked off the today's documentary boom, as well as stuff like The Jinx and all the classics. One of the most remarkable series that I've seen is The Staircase, which was just incredible because of the access that the filmmakers had. In kind of chronicling like the life of this family. So I've always been very interested in true crime and documentary, and I was just lucky enough to have India Today call me for Dancing on the Grave, and that's kind of where it started. And then from 2020, it was probably about a 2.5 year project, and then straight after that, I caught the documentary bug, and I was like, want to make some more now. So luckily, I've been working with DocuBay on a couple of projects now, one of which involved you, Krupa. And I would say that I hope in the future that I have more opportunities to make more documentaries, as well as my primary passion, which is fiction. But let's see.
Yes, I would like to add when I've seen Lela, why we're
Mm,
also mentioning it was very different from the current OTT scenarios that we had, because it was on the verge of dystopian world and also political scenario and also crime. I think it was a mixture of everything. I
mm.
think I'm going to ask you, when are we releasing second season of Lela? What is happening to the girl the woman, the mother that was there? So I think if there
Mm.
are any spoilers, you can definitely share.
Well, I'm afraid my main spoiler is that there will be no second season of Layla. It's too controversial in today's landscape. In fact, Layla was probably one of the first really kind of controversial shows that kind of gathered notoriety, right?
I
I
agree.
think it was really the first OTT show that really started to kind of push the buttons of certain groups of people in India. And when we were making it, when we were writing it, we kind of had our kind of worries that that might be the case, and it was. But of course now there's absolutely no way you'd ever be able to make a Layla or even a Ghoul or even a Beitar. Like the landscape has changed
Oh,
quite dramatically in the last
yeah,
5 or 6 years. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. It was something that it was like an Indian version of Black Mirror. So it
Yeah,
was
Black
very
Mirror, but
nice.
also what was the Handmaid's Tale, right? The Handmaid's Tale. Like it felt it shared a lot of DNA with the Handmaid's Tale, the book as well as
Yes.
the show. But in the writers' room, we were always mindful of the fact that let's hope this isn't the Indian Handmaid's Tale. We've got to do stuff which is slightly different, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
Mm.
So now that you've been saying that you've been doing this for a long time, and you also said right now that the landscape has been changing. So now, in your course of documentaries, you must have had a change in your perception towards true crime genre, or how it's made, or the topics that people like now. Because right now on Netflix, I open anything, it's always related to serial killers and crime
Hmm.
and murder
Hmm.
and police. That's it. So, do you think
Yeah.
something has changed, and your perception about it? How has that occurred?
So yes. Um, Nowadays when something is successful, when it is proven to attract an audience, what you get is the floodgates open, and then you just get a huge torrent of content, which is essentially what we have nowadays when it comes to documentaries, true crime stories, whether they are unscripted or scripted. Like I suppose the big one right now is Ed Gein show by what's his name, Ryan Murphy. There's obviously a public appetite for crime, for true crime, for serial killers. There's a real interest there. I don't know how healthy it is. I suppose my my intent has always been that if we're going to make a story about something that really happened, if we're going to make a show about something that really happened, then it has to serve a purpose. It can't, it's too twisted just to be entertainment. It's just, we
I
have to be
agree. I
saying
agree.
something. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
I
like,
remember you had asked
mm,
me this question.
mm,
Is it like we had talked about this? Ki right now serial killers are being, on
mm,
everything is serial killer, and
mm.
if there is no purpose to it, then why are we even making it? I remember this, like the conversation we
Yeah.
had this.
Yeah, especially when it comes to documentary, right? Because you're dealing with real people, many of whom might have actually been living through the experience that you're depicting on screen, right? So you kind of have a responsibility to the victims and the people who have suffered to tell something that isn't just about exploitation, right? It can't just be about entertainment, but of course, let's be real, it is about entertainment. Audiences will tune in because they want to be engaged, they want to be entertained at the end of the day. But just because it's entertainment, it doesn't mean it can't be serving a purpose, and it doesn't mean that you can't deal with certain issues in a kind of mature and sensitive manner, which I hope few documentaries I have made do. So, yeah.
Yeah. So as you said that the whole when we watch true crime genre, there is we you can say we encounter exploitation of people, we encounter different thought processes, and it can be sometimes traumatizing for you also. Like when we were listening to the Dupatta Killer story also, when I was reading about it, and when we saw the original video also, it was there was no apathy, there was no guilt. So again, we love to know the start of this process, like how do you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally? Of course, intellectually it might sound very fancy, but how do you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally before the work of any difficult project like this, of any true crime genre?
Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting question because um, going into these stories, I never really kind of think about it, right? I just think, okay, it's another job, right? It's I'm going to find out about something disturbing, but it's not something that I've ever proactively addressed. Like, I don't know how it is in other countries. Like, I don't know how the industry would be. Maybe they have therapists on set. Maybe they have people who are there to talk to the filmmakers. I don't know. But in India, they don't, right? And I, to be honest, like I've never found it that difficult to separate my work with, my downtime. It doesn't really kind of haunt me outside of the work hours. But I would say that with any project I do, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, there's got to be something that I become passionate about, right? There's got to be something that hooks me into the material. And that's across the board. And even if it's just a trivial thing that I find interesting, or if it's like a serious thing that I feel like needs to be talked about, doesn't matter. I've just got to find the passion there in order to spend a year or more working on it. So with documentaries, with the two documentaries that have been released and the one coming up, um, it hasn't been difficult to find those points which kind of make me think, okay, this is a story that should be told. This is an important story because of this reason, So with Dancing on the Grave, for example, we're talking about a an aristocratic woman who's being repressed by her family and the family structures and the society that she's within, to the extent where she's going to make some very questionable decisions as to who she decides to trust in life, which would eventually lead to her downfall, right? So in that situation, in with that story, it just occurred to me that this is about, the patriarchal structure. It's about a woman being stripped of her agency. Therefore, she turns to something that she feels will bring her out of a trap that she's kind of caught in. So that in itself was interesting to me because it's about violence against women, which is relevant across the social strata. It's relevant whatever financial bracket that you live within. Then for Du Particular, of course, it's completely the opposite of Dancing on the Grave. It's about an underclass of women who are not being listened to, who are vulnerable because of being disenfranchised by the community that they live within. So that to me, of course, strikes a chord, and I want to tell their story, and similarly with the documentary I'm working on right now, it's a similar story. So yeah, there's got to be that thing that kind of hooks me, that draws me in. When it comes to actually how disturbing the material is, as I say, there's nothing that's really kind of bothered me too much. Although I would say on the particular, there was a couple of photos that were part of the court documents that was part of the evidence that was given by the prosecution, which shows pictures that were taken by the abuser, the Mahanand Nayak, where allegedly he was taking pictures of a young woman that he was abusing. And I remember seeing those photos for the first time, and just that's what hooked me to that project, right? That was when I was like, oh wow, okay. And I felt angry, and I felt like, okay, I want to take these photos and I want to show them to all the people who failed that woman, and just ask them, how can you have, how can you sleep at night when you've looked at these photos and said that she wasn't abused, when she told you she was abused, you didn't believe her, and you didn't even believe the photographs that show very distinctly that she was being abused. So that kind of thing kind of annoys me. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm interested in this now. So it's like that.
Yeah, so does it mean that when you make a movie, like how for us as forensic psychologists, in now that we've got so used to crime stories and everything, we've got desensitized and we already know, okay, we kind of predict the victim stories already. Okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, or this must be the cause or something. So does it mean that when you are looking into a story, you've kind of desensitized yourself, or do you make these documentaries to get them to make sure that these victims' ka justice is shown to the world, or is there any ulterior motive, or is it purely for the love of documentaries and purely to show a story?
I mean, I think there's a bit of everything. I'm a filmmaker. I love what I do. The art form of documentary making is an incredibly what's the word for it? Valuable art form. I mean, there's some of the greatest films ever made have been documentaries. There's plenty of documentary filmmakers that I love. So yes, there's the technical skill and the challenge and the art form of documentary making, which is of course very attractive to me. Yes, also I would hope that the projects that I work on, because every project takes such a long time, is something that I feel passionate about and there's a reason to be making. So that is there with documentaries. What was the other part of the question?
Yeah, no, I meant to say ki, is there, when you start making documentaries, as you said, it does not affect you so much. Is it because you've got desensitized to it, or you just know what's going to happen?
So I think when it comes to the kind of desensitization discussion, it's actually really interesting, and it's something that you guys can go and do some research on and come back with another show about it. But basically, nowadays on social media, we see so much just horrific material that clogs up our various timelines across various apps. I just think, yes, I think people are becoming desensitized to graphic violence that they see. In fact, I think it's an even bigger problem than that, because I actually genuinely believe that people are becoming addicted to violent material. And that's kind of purely anecdotal, but like I talk to people, obviously, I myself, if I'm looking at Instagram, which I try and do as little as possible, I'm going to see, I can be scrolling past the funny cat video, and then I'll see some guy getting lynched in the street in, I don't know, some part of UP or whatever. It's like the violence is just there underneath the trivial and nonsensical and the meaningless. There's some real video of some horrific crime or accident or a fight. You know, it's remarkable how much of what we see on social media is just fighting videos. And even if it's just blurred out, it still activates like an adrenal response in your system. And I know it's affecting other people because I just hear from friends and families like, oh, I've been watching this video, I've been watching this video. I can't, you know, now I've gone onto YouTube and I'm watching police cameras and dash cams, and we're all watching more and more violent material because of its prevalence on social media. And then if you go to other places like X, formerly known as Twitter, and if you go on Reddit, you can see some very graphic material. Sometimes it's removed before too many people have seen it, but sometimes it's not. I refer recently to the Charlie Kirk shooting. I mean, it took a couple of scrolls down the X video column to see him being shot and blood
Yeah,
spurting
those
out of his
videos were
neck.
easily available. True, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like we're all becoming desensitized to violence. And it's not surprising that some of the most successful and popular programs on TV are true crime documentaries, and many of them are very good, but many of them you could perhaps say that maybe they're just doing it for, you know, a cheap entertainment. But let's be honest. I mean, true crime documentaries is a form of entertainment at the end of the day. As I said, all I can hope for is that there's a reason for telling those stories beyond getting people to just switch on and tune out, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes, I think wonderfully
Mhm.
answered over here. And so already you answered this that it's you don't feel difficult to create any boundaries between your personal and this professional life because you, as you said, you constantly deal with traumatic material or graphic files. So it's been easy for you. And also you said that about therapists on film sets, because you've been also from UK. Do you think UK has such things? Means if there is,
I really
or
don't
do you
know.
have any
I'm
idea?
afraid I don't know. No, I don't know because I've never worked in the UK industry. I honestly don't know. We can find out.
Yeah,
Perhaps not. I don't know. Should there
yeah.
be?
Even I've
Mm,
not heard. Yeah,
yeah. I don't know. I feel like we're you know, if you're in a professional environment and you know that you're going to be making a documentary about a real crime, then you probably already know in your head that you're going to see some difficult material, right? The stuff that disturbs
correct.
me the most is what I'm seeing on social media, more so than grainy images in court documents, you know, or 30-year-old archival footage. You know, it's the most visceral and affecting things that we see are readily available on social media to people of all ages. So that's, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I don't feel like I've ever been kind of that disturbed by what I'm seeing. Of course, on a intuitive level, it's disturbing and horrific what you're hearing about, but I've always been able to kind of remain quite objective. And also, I don't know, when I was 18 or 19, I worked in a hospital and I saw a lot of kind of accidents and operations, and I got like overloaded by scenes of blood and guts that nowadays it doesn't really affect me that much. Also, I watch a lot of horror films and I make horror films as well, so that's probably somewhere in there as well.
Yes, I think that is an amazing answer. In this question you had answered that how your what is the aim of your making a documentary, for the love, sometimes for the interest of it, everything. Now I want to also ask what happens at the end once you make the documentary. And documentaries, because it is based on real lives, or sometimes fictional, maybe if it is Leela or Dancing on the Grave or even Dupatta Killer, anything, it has its repercussions. Have you ever faced such repercussions, and how do you deal with it mentally and emotionally?
Okay, so I mean, I haven't really faced any kind of like very profound or serious repercussions to anything that I've made. I think Ghoul kind of went slightly under the radar because it was quite niche. It was a bit kind of Western horror, and I don't think people necessarily considered it being particularly Indian. But it also came out at a time when, again, the OTT platforms were trying to be provocative and they were trying to manufacture controversy. So, and it was also at a time where the government hadn't yet kind of really figured out how to regulate the OTT platforms. Now they have. When it comes to Betal, same situation. Although the Betal wasn't really particularly controversial. Layla, as I mentioned earlier, was the one that actually got kind of noticed. There was a couple of times when I was asked to kind of respond to comments on like a radio news show, for example, where there was kind of dissatisfied. I don't know. I can't remember who it was now. I think it may have been the Shiv Sena politician who raised an objection about Layla. My answer was always that, in a democracy, we should be able to watch what we want to watch, and we're adults, and we should be able to choose what we decide to spend our attention on. And it's kind of, when it comes to censorship, and I kind of find it embarrassing that educated adults have to be told by people in positions of power what they can and cannot see. I think it's just, it's pathetic. But that's the way it is in many countries around the world. There was, when we made Dancing on the Grave, we were slightly worried that we would offend the surviving members of Shakira Khalili's family. And I did hear that there was some dissatisfaction within some of the daughters. But I think that once they saw the documentary, they realized that it was a fairly sympathetic look at their mother. When we released Apata Killer, I know that there were some members of the people that we had interviewed for that project who were dissatisfied with how we portrayed them, or the argument that we had put across. But my thing was like, okay, do I feel ethically I had a right to say these things? Did I feel there was a problem ethically with putting certain arguments across? And I don't think I do have an issue. I think that I said what I wanted to say with that documentary, and I understand if people get upset by that. But to me, it's fairly easy, right? I mean, even if this guy didn't kill 14 women, he was still convicted of the murder of 2 women. That's also enough. Even 1 is bad. 2 is quite bad. 14 is terrible, but who knows? I mean, like he wasn't convicted of all of those murders, but he was still convicted of 2. So I feel like the documentary kind of makes an assumption that yes, he did kill the other women, and personally, I believe he did. I can't. There is no there's no court case to kind of say 100% that he did, but I believe he did from my research, and I have no problem in standing by what we said in that documentary. And similarly with the documentary I'm making right now, it's kind of the same thing, right? At the end of the day, it's not a news program. I'm not here to be objective necessarily. I'm here to research and offer my view of the facts, and also at the end of the day, at the very least, ask questions and kind of prompt the audience to ask questions as well, even if they disagree with what's being said.
Yeah, I think we had one of our questions on what ethics do you follow in such crime media. I think you've answered that. Because sometimes to create that masaledar, to create that hit blockbuster series, we might take on one standpoint, might want to dramatize everything. So I like how you said that you want to keep it objective, want to support what is actually there. Okay, and
well, I would just add to, just kind of rephrase that slightly, in that I don't think in any of the shows that I've done I've added masala for the sake of it, right? You do need to tell the story as engagingly as possible to keep the people watching, right? But you also have a an ethical responsibility to some version of the truth that you might, as the filmmaker, believe in. And I think we've achieved that. Like if you're telling a story, like for example, in Dancing on the Grave, so there's I think it's episode 2 where we're talking about the actual crime itself, right? And of course we've edited it in a way to kind of maximize suspense and surprise. We're still telling the actual story, right? We're still telling our version of the truth. And if we have to kind of use filmmaking techniques to keep the audience engaged and interested, I don't see the problem in that, really. At the end of the day, we're telling a story, and through that story, we can discuss the arguments that we'd like to discuss.
Yes. And now shifting from true crime in general for filmmaking, because you've been a writer, you've been a director, everything. So what kind of support system do you have to process these difficult things that you encounter during your work, formal or informal? I'm very sure you have a support system. So how do you have it?
Support system. What is a support system? I suppose in the broadest sense, a support system would be friends and family to speak to, right? Yes, I have some lovely friends and I have a lovely family, and I have people around me that I can talk to. Beyond that, being in honor of World Mental Health Day, I feel like mental health is a topic that is incredibly important to everybody. I mean, your life is built up of 50% mental health and 50% physical health, and that is the balance. And the thing that I think people underestimate with mental health is that it can kind of creep up on you, right? You can kind of think that you're fine, or you can kind of think that, oh, it's not going to happen to me, or you can kind of not really understand what mental health actually means. If somebody says they're depressed or they have clinical depression, you might kind of dismiss it, or you might not kind of know exactly what they're referring to until it happens to you, at which point it's like, oh, okay, that's what it is. Yeah, and it's pretty bad. So I feel like it's important that we take our mental health seriously, and that does mean maybe seeking therapy, seeking psychiatry, seeking professional help if you need something more than friends and family to help you.
Yes, I think these are some golden tips we should always remember. And I'm very sure you might sometimes face a writing block or something. Do you use any kind of techniques for diluting that mental stress to have that perfect script or something?
I don't know if I've ever written a perfect script or if I even have the capacity to do so, but writer's block. Okay, well, this is a whole different conversation because we're talking about writing fiction, but writer's block is something that if you're a paid professional, you don't have much time for, because you've got to churn it out, right? I feel like writer's block might be something that would happen to some kind of creative genius, which I am not. I am a professional who occasionally has to do some writing, and I have a deadline, and I will try my best to make that deadline. Most of the time I would fail, but only by a week or two. I think writing as a profession is like any other job, right? It's the same for you guys. It's whatever you have to do to unwind. I suppose writing is quite an insular profession in that you don't necessarily have to deal with other people if you're writing on your own, but often I am writing with other people, so you get into some quite close relationships with your co-writers and your co-creators, which is always very fulfilling as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, it's just, you got to find ways to unwind. I would suggest exercise, walking, going for walks, eating healthily, getting a lot of sleep, drink a lot of coffee, a lot of high quality roasted coffee beans. That's important. Don't drink instant coffee. It's shit. You got to have proper coffee that sees you through the day. Actually, I feel like if you drink enough coffee, then the day is easy. If you, I mean, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, I agree. But then the nights will be longer for us, no? Because he will just be
Well, then you
awake.
got to switch in the afternoon to dark roasted coffee,
Oh, I see. So you are a coffee
less
lover,
caffeine.
which know the varieties.
Yeah,
I agree.
you can't have light roast in the afternoon. That's a recipe for a sleepless night.
I agree. And sleepless, say, I remember now that sometimes what happens with us, for example, is when we see so many cases, we become
Hmm.
very cynical or anxious about the world. We feel like, for example, when I go through a particular street or an area which I know is very vulnerable for women and children, or there have been some cases of gang wars, I will always be on my high alert. So, for you, are you now positive about the world? Is there hope, or do you feel cynical or anxious looking at so many documentaries, fictional, non-fictional, anything? So, what do you think?
Well, actually, I think that you yourselves would answer this question better than me because you actually see much more of this kind of stuff than I do, right? I'm just a visitor. You guys deal with this for a living. So, Krupa, I'm sure that you yourself can answer these questions in much more interesting detail than I can. In a general view of has it made me think of things? Yes, it has. Because of the especially because of the documentary I'm working on right now, which I'm unfortunately I can't go into detail about, but that this current documentary has it's so kind of horrific that it kind of I do worry about like friends and my wife if you know if she's kind of going somewhere. You know, I feel like okay, there's a great quote from the book God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, right, which she says anything can happen to anyone at any time, right? And I'm probably misquoting, but I believe that's what the line is. And I think that that's correct, right? We take safety for granted. We take leaving our homes and just walking up the street and getting a rickshaw and getting to where we need to get to for granted. But the simple fact is that anything can happen, and unfortunate as it is, that anything becomes a lot worse for women around the world, particularly in India. Crimes against women is just an epidemic of horrific violence that has been going on since the beginning of humanity. It's just an unfortunate fact that we all have to kind of deal with. So yeah, I do worry. I do worry. No, knowing what can happen to people, I do worry. Nowadays, we're in a period of history which is quite dark. I would say there's a lot of things happening very very quickly. I'm not particularly hopeful about where we're going to end up in a few years. But that's a much wider observation than just hearing about crime. I'm sure there's a statistics that you guys know about which would say whether crime is going up or down. Of course, those statistics are not reliable because it's all dependent on analysis and who's entering the facts. And, you know, the Congress party might have their set of facts and the BJP might have their set of facts. We all have to kind of interpret whether things are getting better or worse. I honestly don't know. You probably know better than I do whether they are. Yeah, but yeah, it absolutely the three documentary projects I've been part of has definitely does make me pause and just think. I have said it regularly when my wife is for example going on a trip somewhere. You know, I just said, you know, be careful. You know, I think more now if she's coming home late, you know, please just send me the cab details, etc., etc. Not that I could do anything about it if something went wrong, apart from maybe report it to the police the next day in tears. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's correct interpretation of what happens. I think even for me, I send live location wherever I'm going or click pictures of the vehicle
Yeah, and you
registration.
should. You should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think one of the last two questions is, one is, you've been talking to a lot of prosecutors, journalists, everybody in the criminal justice system. For example, when I used to talk and do project in Tihar jail, I saw that there was some urge to bring a change among the people. They wanted to work, but the system was itself very slow. So, but for you, what do you think when you talk to journalists, prosecution lawyers, or people who were victims also? Has your perspective about the justice system changed from where you started and now?
It has, yes. I've learned more about the Indian justice system since working on these shows, and uh, it's been really fascinating understanding how court cases work, reading those court documents, even if they do go on for thousands of pages. But it's really fascinating to kind of to see the logical breakdown of these arguments, and it's actually quite satisfying once you kind of get into it to see how the prosecution and the defense are kind of leveling their arguments and what they're basing it on. So I have had an insight and understanding into the way the justice system works, and I'm sure it's very similar across the world when it comes to the arguments between lawyers, prosecution, etc. I have also learned that there is I mean, without wanting to get into trouble, there is an issue with the justice system when you have a single person interpreting the arguments and making crucial decisions based upon their personal interpretation of the evidence, right? Which is why I would advocate a jury system like we have in the UK and the US, where a number of people are hearing the evidence and a number of people are debating the decisions made in that court. I found in a couple of cases recently, the current one that I'm doing right now, and also the particular, I've just simply disagreed with the judge's analysis of the evidence. And I've also heard from lawyers and advocates and prosecutors who I respect and I believe are intelligent people that they often think that judges are inadequate to often preside over these complicated cases. And I agree with that. I mean, like, why do we assume this middle-aged man is capable of presiding over such a range of different cases, right? There are going to be some good ones. There's going to be some bad ones, just like in any other line of work. From the standpoint of the fact is that all three documentaries that I've worked on have been about crimes against women. I just don't see why the people making the crucial decisions are middle-aged men. How can that work? Do you know what I mean? Like there were how many judges were there on the Shakira Khalili case? 9. They were all men, all middle-aged men, right? How many judges were there on the Dupatta killer case, right? Again, in the Dupatta killer, Rupa, you probably remember there was a crucial accusation made by the surviving victim of the serial killer, the alleged serial killer, and she wasn't believed. And why wasn't she believed? Well, A, because the prosecutor was successful the defense lawyer was successful in the way they presented their argument. But B, because of interpretation of a subjective interpretation of behavior by a middle-aged man on a 17-year-old girl. Like, how can that work? Like, how can that work? Like, most human beings, as much as we like to pretend we can imagine what other people are thinking, simple fact is we can't. We don't understand other people's behavior. We don't understand how somebody who has gone through horrific amounts of trauma are going to act and behave, especially if they're still very young and inexperienced and not exposed to the world and being told all their lives that you shouldn't say certain things, that you should stay quiet, and being used to a patriarchal society. So to have a middle-aged man take a subjective behavioral analysis of a young girl and then not believe them, even though they've said I was raped, and then have photographs of that person in a state where clearly they're not happy, and then to have that man say, I don't believe it. Like, to me, there's just something deeply, deeply wrong with that system. what to do. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Even when we deal with complex cases of organized crime or cybercrime, I feel that a lot of training is required in criminal justice system to keep them updated about what the Gen Z terms are. Like I remember in one of the trainings, one of the cyber person told us that just because a boy and a girl are talking and they're sending like lol or just sending, hardship Korean does not mean they're in love. It's just the Gen Z way of talking to each other.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, right? Absolutely. Like how much of how many problems, everyday problems do we have because of misinterpretations of behavior, right? When it comes to men and women, how many times have crimes been committed towards women by men who just have simply misread social cues or have just misunderstood certain things? Like a lot of men just don't get it, right? If a woman feels threatened, she might not be like, get away from me. She might smile and kind of laugh and back away and change the subject. But to a man who's not attuned to that kind of micro behavior, they might interpret that in completely the wrong way. So it's like, yeah, it's just reaffirming what we were just saying, which is just like, I feel like in crimes against women, there needs to be more female judges, of course, and there needs to be more female police officers. And I know that progress is being made, but yeah, I guess not enough, perhaps.
I think it's a little slow and it has to now quicken with the crimes, definitely. I think last question is that what has been your life learning till now about mental health or just about life, and what is your future like now? Or do we envision?
My learning of mental health is that all of the small issues that you have right now, I'm assuming you guys are about like what, 10 or 15 years younger than me. I don't know. But basically, every little thing that's in your head right now that you consider to be a problem, in 10 or 15 years' time, it will be a problem, right? It's going to be a big problem. So you've got to be aware of the issues that you might have early on. But when your body starts to not be as good as it used to, when it stops being as efficient as it used to be, then suddenly those mental health problems that you've been ignoring and pushing under the carpet will come back to haunt you. So I feel like as I said, and I think this is the relevant thing about World Mental Health Day, even though we've missed it, but basically, what is it? What was I going to say? Yeah, you just can't underestimate it. Mental health is as important as physical health, and that's the thing I think that people can't understand about mental health is that mental health issues manifest themselves as physical problems, and that can't imagine or understand until it's actually happened to them. And I feel like sometimes, we all preach about it on social media, be empathetic, be aware of other people's mental health, but that's all nonsense, right? Like we can't put ourselves in other people's shoes. We think we can, we can't. And until it happens to you, you really don't know what it's like. And, it's all very well virtue signaling on social media, but real empathy is important when it comes to mental health. And you just don't know how it's gonna manifest itself, but it probably will at some point. So you should be aware of it. And when it does manifest, there's no shame in seeking professional help. I would say.
Yes, I think, and the follow-up question was, what do you have in future? How do you envision your future as?
How do I envision my future? Well, I will continue grinding away at the film industry, trying to make a horror film, and hopefully make some more documentaries. Continue writing, doing what I love. In a broader sense, I don't know. We're living in a very, very strange period of history, which is kind of on the one hand exciting, but on the other hand doom laden and terrifying. All I can say is that I'm very lucky to have grown up in the 90s and the noughties, which is probably one of the most stable windows of human history. And we're just heading right into a very unstable period. And who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be exciting. Get ready.
I agree. And I also want to know, I also know it said finest horror movies in India. Yes, I think all the best. Do you, how's that vision going?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. At some point, India will make a great horror film that isn't just for Indian audiences, but is for international audiences too. And it does well abroad, as well as just domestically, or maybe it won't do well domestically, but it will do well abroad. Who knows? It will happen. I hope I'm the person to make it.
Yes,
I may well not be. I probably won't. I'm sure there are already projects in production right now, which will be good horror films. But until then, we can just hope. Horror is a very translatable genre, and it does well across the world, and we're all pretty much scared of the same things. The only difference is folklore and ghost stories and mythology, but basically we're all scared of the same things, as you, I'm sure, are well aware. So yeah, but yeah, I think that it's a matter of time before the great Indian horror film is made. And there's already some very good ones in India, but I just feel like they're too specific to Indian audiences to cross over. I have said in the past that there aren't any good Indian horror films. That's just not true. I was just being provocative. But we haven't seen one that really travels, and I think that's the goal. I think that, and it will happen. It will happen.
Yeah, and I'm very sure, sir, you'll do it. I'm very excited to see your vision coming through soon. Yeah.
But I would say that far more interesting than my comments on all of these topics would be your own, being an expert and having seen far more than I will have ever seen. I'm just a visitor. I'm just a tourist into the world of crime. I am not an expert. At the end of the day, I'm a filmmaker. My job is just to tell engaging stories. And of course, I like to tell stories that I'm passionate about. But the real people doing the real work are people like you. And, that should be acknowledged. Of course, it's great what you're doing. You're bringing knowledge to your audiences. And I hope you guys continue to build up a large viewership.
Yes, thank you, sir, for your kind words. And I think they are quite appreciative of what we are doing. Gives us validation. So I will.
Validation is very important for World Mental Health Day. Validation is very important.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for sharing your journey and your insights with us today. We all consume crime documentaries and similar kind of media, which is why it becomes so important to address this mental health of those behind the camera. And you've been a great help to us to understand what happens behind the camera. So, Hiral, did you enjoy listening to sir?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, with this discussion that we had here today, I'm sure that it has, helped people to destigmatize mental health for so many people who are in a similar situation, like especially other creatives in high stress fields. Yes, so.
Yes, I think so brought up amazing points about how we should have gender. We should look at gender in criminal justice system. We should have therapists on crime. Film sets. I think all corporates should have therapists, but it's a very interesting idea. We should have more of fun-related activities when we are doing such high-stake films. So I'm sure everyone who's watching and will watch this YouTube video will understand why it's important to talk about our mental health in criminal justice system and the ways we can cope, care, and set boundaries. Yes, Hiral.
Yeah, exactly. So, in any line of profession, at the end of the day, it comes down to, that mental health actually really truly matters. So, yeah, I'm really glad we had this conversation today, and I'm sure that our viewers, our audience will also be able to resonate with it just as much. Yeah, so shall we bring an end to the show then?
Yes, a big thank you once again to Patrick, sir, and to our lovely
Thank
audience
you,
who will
guys.
watch us. Thank you so much, sir. This marks the beginning of our A Day in the Life of Justice series, where we'll continue decoding the minds behind crime, justice, and humanity. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more real conversations this World Mental Health Month. Thank you.